Okay, it's 1:03 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So I want to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon or morning or evening, I guess, depending on what time zone you're in. So thank you for joining us virtually. If you are unaware of what the Holland Project is, the Holland Project is an all ages DIY arts and music initiative by young people for young people in the Truckee Meadows, specifically located here in Reno, Nevada. The mission of the gallery is to seek and create a go-to art space in Reno to see young contemporary artists and their influences both regionally and nationally. And today we're here to listen to a talk with Coulter Fussell and Cicelia Rose-Gata, and it would be moderated by the exhibition curators, Michelle Lassaline and Michelle Laxalt. Before we get into the talk, Coulter and Cicelia will give brief little remarks, about 10 to 15 minutes each, about their work, about the work that's currently being exhibited here at the gallery space. And then we'll have 25 to 30 minutes for a Q&A between the curators and the artists, and then we'll open it up for remarks from the audience. So that's the structure we're going to follow. Hopefully we'll stay on time. That way everyone gets to consume as much information as possible at a reasonable hour, and we get to head out and do whatever we need to do for the rest of the day. So before I get started, I'll do some bios. So Michelle Lassaline is a multidisciplinary artist based in the Pacific Northwest. Lassaline received her BFA in painting and performance art from the University of Nevada, Reno in 2014. As a member of the Holland Project Gallery Committee from 2013 to 2016, she co-curated the exhibitions Resound and Fussell, as well as working with UNR on the exhibition Data Local. She has received grants from the Elizabeth Greenshields Foundation, Artist Trust, the City of Seattle, for Culture, the Nevada Arts Council, and Sierra Arts Foundation. Lassaline has been performing as the, I'm going to butcher it, the Toy Brow troupe. All right, sorry about that, Michelle. Regularly since 2014, and has made it her full-time job since 2018. Performing at events including the Seattle Mayor's Arts Awards, the Tacoma Art Museum, the Holland Project, the Nevada Museum of Art, Art Town, and more. She is currently pursuing her MFA at the Maine College of Art while working on an upcoming solo exhibition for the Oates Park Art Center in Fallon, Nevada in August 2021. And then I'll do Michelle Laxalt's bio. Michelle Laxalt is a multidisciplinary artist currently based in Atlanta. She earned her BFA from the University of Nevada, Reno, and an MFA as a Welch Fellow from Georgia State University in Atlanta. Laxalt has exhibited nationally in numerous exhibitions. She has given artist talks at the Gallery 72 and Mint Gallery in Atlanta, and has participated in artist panels at the Holland Project Gallery, Georgia Tech, and Auburn University in Alabama. She has completed residencies at the Vermont Studio Center and the Hombridge Center in North Georgia. From 2015 to 2018, she taught undergraduate studio courses in ceramics and three-dimensional design at Georgia State University. She recently completed the Mint Leap 3-year fellowship and currently works out of her home studio. In addition to her studio practice, Laxalt is the gallery manager for the Forward Arts Foundation, a nonprofit arts organization in Atlanta. There, she has overseen numerous group and solo exhibitions and plays a key role in administrating the foundation's prestigious Edge Award. She also co-curates its annual Summer Invitational, an exhibition highlighting contemporary craft and craft-based work from Atlanta and the Southeast. So I know we're all muted, but maybe just a round of applause for our moderators/curators, Michelle Lassaline and Michelle Laxalt. And without further ado, I'll hand it over to them.
Okay, so should I go? Do you want to pin me and Coulter?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. Let's see.
Okay, cool. So thank you all for coming, and thank you, Holland, for making this possible, and Coulter and Cicelia for being here as well, and for sharing your art with everybody. So just to introduce Coulter before I turn it over to her, I was also going to just read her bio. Coulter was born and raised in Columbus, Georgia, an old textile town. She is the youngest family quilter, hailing from multi-generations of seamstresses and quilters. She produces boundary-pushing quilt works using old, discarded, and donated textiles as her sole materials. She has exhibited works across the country, from the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art to the Piecework Collective in New York City to the Halsey Institute of Contemporary Art in Charleston, South Carolina. As a craftswoman trained only by her mother, Coulter was the finalist for the 2017 South Art Southern Prize, the 2019 Visual Arts inductee into the Mississippi Institute of Arts and Letters, and a 2019 United States Artist Fellow in Craft. And she currently lives in Walter Valley, Mississippi with her family. And I was introduced to Coulter's work at the Atlanta Biennial in 2016 here in Atlanta at the Contemporary. And I've been a fan of hers and just following along ever since. If you don't already, I would highly recommend following her on Instagram, because she's very generous with her process and yeah, the info that goes into making her work. So I will turn it over to Coulter, and she can discuss her works that she has on view right now at Holland.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you all so much for having me on here, and thanks to Holland Project for having me there. I'm upstairs at Southside Gallery in Oxford, Mississippi, and it's an open gallery, so you might see people walking around. And there are also bars on either side of it. There's a chance you're going to hear people partying on either side, because there's lots of loud music, and that's what they're doing. I really loved Holland when I went there. I had no idea really what to expect. I'd never been to the Holland Project, and that space and that sort of DIY attitude at the whole place there was like, that's like my soul language. That is exactly the stuff I like. Like, if, you know, especially in a place like Mississippi, if you don't have it, you got to build it yourself. You know, you can't wait for somebody to do it for you. You got to make it on your own. So like, really love that I have work at Holland, and I love the whole thing going on there. I think it's great. I wish every town had a place like that. As far as my work there goes, I typically make quilts, and as of late, my quilts have always been pretty off the wall, because I wasn't really like born with that precision gene. You know, like I wasn't like naturally good at doing things like really, well. And so what I lacked in those sort of categories, I really sort of, especially as a child, filled in with things I was seeing in like contemporary painting, so I was replacing what I considered like a lack with stuff from painting. Anyway, so my quilts have always been a little, non-traditional, I guess. And some of that's by default, some of it's by design. Several months ago, I started really pushing my quilt work to the point where like it probably wasn't, really quilts anymore. It was becoming much more sculptural. It's like sculptures with like sort of a quilt base. Quilts are sculptural anyway. They're double-sided, they fold, they bend, they move. The quilts are not really a two-dimensional artwork anyway. So what was happening with the work for Holland was I started to really build up and outward. Like a lot of the features are stuffed. Some of the features are like made of wood, which is leftover scrap wood that was given to me. And the whole entire focus of the whole sort of focus of the show is a River Raft quilt series. And that's where the quilts were sort of a conceptual idea. They were supposed to be, and are supposed to be, an idea of like using them as a raft to escape some sort of situation, some sort of like life situation. And so it's sort of you like using the river as escape, and you're escaping on the quilt pretty much. And so I sort of built the quilt so that parts of them inflated, you know, like a raft would. And on each raft are certain like tools that you might need in any sort of like journey or escape. There's like conceptual tools you could use to like go fishing. Like some of the pieces have nets in them, so if you were to like need to catch food on the river, you would have a place to put the fish that you caught. There's little boxes on some of the quilts where you could like put little your children's toys to keep them dry from the water, you know. There's places where I've hidden money in some of the quilts, you know, so there's like cash hidden in there in case you need some cash. So, you know, it's real like, it's serious subject matter, and it's really sort of, it can be dark subject matter, but there's really an element of like, it's real playful. I hope y'all could hear me. There was people walking around. So, you know, I try to like address sort of like dark subjects, but in a way that has a little bit of like some sort of optimism or humor, some sort of like real playful element to it without making anything, you know, trite. But, you know, for me, like my favorite part or the best part for me about working or being a quilter at all, in fact, I wouldn't be a quilter if this element wasn't part of my work, is that I use entirely donated textiles. It all comes to me. People drop stuff off at my studio door, and sometimes they mail it to me. But, you know, a couple times a week, there'll be a bag at the studio door. And it's like everything, like, you know, it's like old curtains. It's like a t-shirt from Walmart from yesterday, like old curtains. I mean, like curtains from like, you know, century and a half ago, like that old. And I love all that stuff. And, you know, I feel like really our clothes and our textiles are really sort of the last line of physical defense between like our bodies and and the outside world. And, you know, the human journey is really sort of like echoed on these old clothes and textiles, whether it be like sun bleaching, fading, tearing, or whatever, or sometimes that it's not worn, you know, a new shirt that was never worn, you know, there, you know, sometimes the lack of some sort of physical alteration is just as telling as when there is one, you know. So you can read all these clues in this stuff and really see that, you know, our stories are not different. We all have the same stories, you know. So I sort of take these hyper personal stories that happen to me and like really mix them up with what I think I can gather from these stories coming into me on these clothes, and you know, put them all in the same pieces together. And so in this show in Holland project, it's a River Raft series 1, River Raft Quilt series 1. So the idea is it's the first of a series, you know, where I'm going to continue to do more River Raft quilts. I hope I do a series 2. It might just remain series 1. I don't know. Yeah, so it's really sort of the first series where I've now mounted them on plywood. They have definitely become sculptural. Nobody's sleeping under these things, you know. It would be so uncomfortable. And so the quilt has now sort of graduated into really sort of an idea and the basis off which I've based, you know, my thoughts and also the tradition under which I sculpt them. I mean, I'm using a needle and thread, you know, so.
And you're sculpting all by hand, right? Or sewing all by hand, not with a machine?
Yeah, well, sometimes I'll use them on it. This stuff at Holland, like no machine, just because it wouldn't make any sense. You know, that stuff's real rough. It's like, I'd tear up my machines. And, but sometimes if I'm making like a more traditional quilt and there's like just a ton of like big piecing where I have to put a big piece with another big piece, like I'll run it through the machine real quick. But you know, it's really just as quick for me to hand sew something as it is to like deal with the machine most of the time. So, yeah.
I don't know if we want to do Q&A with Coulter. Now, if Cicelia wants to talk. Sorry, I'm going off script.
No, that's great. That's great. Coulter, thank you. Yeah, I think next we'll do 10 minutes for Cicelia to introduce her work, and then we're gonna just have a nice long conversation with all four of us and the audience and the chat. We have a question in the chat right now that says, can we look at the work? And we forgot to mention that there are some live video streams of the Holland Project Gallery in the grid of videos, along with all of us participants in the Zoom. So if you look at the grid of videos, and you'll see one that says the name is HP main space, and that is where Coulter's work is up at the Holland Project right now. And then the other one, HP Servopool, stands for Holland Project Servopool, which is the other part of the building where Cecilia's work is up. So you can scroll through to those by clicking gallery in the top right corner of the Zoom, and then scrolling through all the screens to find that.
Sorry to interrupt. And further through the Q&A, if there's any specific works anyone wants to see, I'm more than welcome to get a closer look with the HP main space.
Cool. So I think we'll move on to let Cicelia give an introduction to her work, and then we'll come back to you, Coulter, and do a kind of group talk. So is that good?
Yeah. I was just saying thank you. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to introduce you, Cicelia. Originally from Kansas, Cicelia Ross-Scotta earned her BFA in sculpture from Colorado State University in 2015 and her MFA in 3D 4M or sculpture from the University of Washington in 2017. That year, she also became a mother. Her work has been exhibited throughout Seattle, including at the Henry Gallery, the Olympic Sculpture Park, and Gallery for Culture. Her work was featured in the Surface Design Journal's 2017 International Exhibition in print, and she has been awarded grants from Artist Trust for Culture and the Surface Design Association. She is working on a new piece for the upcoming outdoor exhibition, This Could Get Snowed On, at Public Space 1 in Iowa City, Iowa. And she will have work included in a group exhibition about textiles and technology at Artworks Center for Contemporary Art in Loveland, Colorado in June. I first encountered Cecilia's work in 2016 at the Jacob Lawrence Gallery at the University of Washington. I believe it was a piece that was a quilt made out of different grits and colors of sandpaper. And then in 2017, I had the privilege of experiencing the installation of her work, I Love You, Are You Okay, at the Henry Gallery. I'm going to talk more about my experience of your work during the talk, but right now, Cecilia's work on view at the Holland Project Gallery is a body of work called Feel Just Like Home. So take it away, Cicelia.
Right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. So this work is, well, let me back up. First of all, I work with textiles and text a lot, and I work usually in a installation type capacity, sculptural capacity. And often these pieces are performative or interactive. And these pieces tend to focus around this theme of vulnerability. Mostly, I'm interested in the necessity of vulnerability for meaningful human connection. So reciprocated vulnerability. And a lot of times this shows up in my work, either by using materials like vulnerable materials, delicate materials, things like that, or by dealing with subject matter that makes me vulnerable. And this show falls into the latter category. This piece is, it's the third of a series, or I guess it's the third, of a series of pieces that it's the fourth. That I've made about my dad. And for this piece, I landed on this idea because we've had a, I'm gonna share a screen. All right, can you guys see this? What I'm typing?
Yep. Yeah.
There we go. Okay. It's not showing up on my computer. Okay. So the reason, so, okay. So this piece, it started because I had sporadic communication with my dad over the last 12 years. But I had just received a, let's see, I'm gonna come back. So I had received an email from him, and my father had experienced homelessness off and on. But there was an address on the bottom of the screen. So I put it into Google Maps, right? Like anyone would. And up pops this motel. And so then I click over to Google reviews, right? And as I started reading, it was pretty typical kind of motel, typical kind of cheap motel, like, you know, all the things that you would expect to happen there, right? But it was also really fascinating to read these reviews. Some of them are really funny. Like one of my favorites says, "Dead with no resurrection," or another that I really enjoy is "Home for Methodist Heads." Those are particularly funny to me, also just because I grew up, both my parents are pastors, and so I don't know, that was funny. So some of them are humorous, some of them are sad. Some of the reviews are written by, you know, other people who were or are experiencing homelessness. And so I wanted to communicate, I wanted to embroider these because I wanted to communicate how, like, seriously I was taking these reviews, like how important they were. Because they were, at the time, a connection to my dad. But I decided to embroider these onto used linens, and I bordered them by towels. And I color coded the reviews. There were so many, and I wanted to try to give folks like a way to visually map the scene, because I didn't know if people would actually take the time to read through each review. So the color coded system is this: red for the reviews that mention sex work or drugs. Orange are reviews that mention like dirt or bugs, cockroaches. Yellow are reviews that mention problems with linens. Probably the most common complaint is just that people had a hard time getting towels. One review even that cracks me up, a woman, she had towels to begin with, and then she left her room and she came back and her towels were missing, which is a mystery. Green indicates reviews that are probably written by people who also experienced homelessness. Blue reviews are people who are complaining about other people who are there. Purple is just a reference to danger. And finally, the reviews that have little black stars, they don't have a particular reference. Like one of my other favorite reviews just says, "It is what it is," 3 stars, black stars. So that was my color-coded system. And I wanted to, is this Alberto's is the time to, I wanted to share a couple particular towels with y'all because it was pretty amazing discovery. This is really awesome because they're just going to come and bring it. Okay. I don't know if I'm going to be able to read it, but we'll try.
Do you want me to read it, Cecilia? I can
Yeah,
read
can
it.
you see it good enough?
Yep. It
Cool.
says, Sierra Threat, February 21st, 2019. I give it 3 stars because of housekeeping. There's a housekeeper named Christy. She causes problems for everyone. She is constantly calling the police on everybody just because she doesn't like them. She makes up multiple lies about people. Please be aware when you stay because she will go into your room if you're not there. She steals and lies constantly. Ladies, if you're married, watch your man. She will try and snag anything and everything. I can't quite read that.
What is it?
Crew happer?
Yes.
Okay. If she wasn't there, the travelers would be a lot better place.
Okay, awesome. So then that one, hang on. So that one, thank you. Is so related to the next one. So that's Sierra Threat. The next review written by Christy.
So Christy,
I can read it.
Okay.
It says 4 stars. They're green. Still here. Could use some deep cleaning, but front desk and housekeeping are amazing. Great customer service. So I feel I'm pretty sure that Christy in that review is the Christy that Sierra Threat is talking about. At least that's what I like. Let's believe that, right? That's amazing. But what was also really interesting to me is that in a previous piece, or actually the piece that Michelle mentioned, I Love You, Are You Okay? Christy shows up there too. And this is how. So that piece, for that piece, I embroidered text messages between my father and I onto 2 different artificial plants. And one plant had my messages, the other plant had my dad's. Now, one of those messages that my dad had sent me, because at the time I made that piece, that was when he was first, it was right when he first started living in the motel. It was like something to the effect of really my biggest problem, and also a little context. My father had lots of health issues and mental, physical estrangement from family. But really, his biggest problem was that he needed a girlfriend. And he said, Christy, the housekeeper who also lives here at the motel, was his closest lead to a girlfriend. So it's just kind of, I just the connection between those pieces, I just think is so amazing, personally, and meaningful. I also will mention that my dad did leave a review as well, so his voice is in this show. And the last the last thing to mention as well is that when I first installed the show in Seattle in October of 2019, just a couple of days before the show opened, my father got housed, which was just so wonderful. So there's a lot in this piece for me, lots of coincidences, or I don't know what you want to call those moments, but yeah, that's Feel Just Like Home. Oh, the title of the piece comes from one of the reviews, which says Feel Just Like Home. I think did I cover the, I don't know.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah,
Right.
thanks for introducing this body of work. And um, we, we're going to jump into a Q&A with both Coulter and Cicelia, but since we're just going to go seamlessly, I'm going to start with what I mentioned earlier was my experience of Cecilia's work. I Love You, Are You Okay? And also based on what you said earlier, Cicelia, that vulnerability is reciprocal and reciprocity is important. So I wrote this morning. I first encountered, no, where is it? Here it is. Yeah, this piece, which was the embroidery of the text messages between Cicelia and her father on fake plants. It was designed, the installation of the work was designed to replicate a waiting room, and it had a very immediate and profound impact on me. It was both triggering and painful. It brought up memories of myself spending a lot of time in waiting rooms, caretaking for a parent. And it was just, yeah, had a very direct impact before I even really knew Cicelia very well. And I have never experienced an artwork that broke me open in such a specific and piercing way. And I felt like that experience was like phoenix tears, like an intense magical healing of deep wounds. Like at that point in my life, I felt like basilisk fangs had already entered me, and like that piece was the sort of drop of just saving that I needed. And afterwards, I got to attend at a different event the performance of that work, and I realized that the way the audience members were asked to read the text messages, and I think if you're in Reno and you can see the Holland show, you could do this and read. I'm suggesting this, but you could go and read those embroidered pieces out loud. It felt like we, as audience members reading Cecilia's embroidery, we were like an assembly line of nurses or pallbearers distributing the weight of the work between us to help lift that burden off of the artist. And it's a gift and an honor to be able to do that for someone like once in life. And I think that's really the strength of Cecilia's work. It transforms the audience into friends, which in the meaning of friends is like people who share each other's burdens. And that's not a question, but it is my curatorial sort of input for curating you into this exhibition. And I think this element of storytelling is what connects Cecilia's work with Coulter's work at a deeper level than just they're both based in fiber. And the kind of contemporary folklore and the way that folklore carries stories that matter to all of us, even if they're based in like a specific person's history. So I want to ask a question to both of you about folklore and storytelling and why that matters, or what your relationship is to that word or that idea. Let's just start with Cicelia, since that's where I started, and then we'll go to Coulter.
Thinking about storytelling. I mean, yeah, I think in general, you know, the series, the works about my dad are, you know, trying to share a story, or trying to understand that, which you know, which keeps developing. It's kind of interesting what happens, you know, when someone passes away. You gather and you tell stories, and I'm just, yeah, I think in a lot of ways, since my dad passed, I've learned a lot more about him than I ever knew. You know, some of it you're like, oh, great, but other things, you know, I don't know. Anyway, my point is that I think that at least those pieces are definitely definitely about story in that way. I don't know. And yeah, I guess I will also say that well, I don't know, the way that my dad's story, but then also like teasing out those things that everybody, or hoping to tease out or identify those things that everybody can relate to, you know. Yeah.
Is it my
Thank
turn?
you. Yeah.
Answer. Yeah, I think Cecilia was working on it. Our work has this thing in common where we like collect the clues to fill the narrative, and because no narrative is complete, you don't come with the full story, and so you gotta get the pieces here and there, and then you put part of yourself in there to make the whole thing fill out. You know, um, I find my clues through the fabric. Sometimes I got to make up what I think it is. Cecilia has found hers on the internet, which is like incredible, you know, and like a list of characters like who talk back and forth. I mean, this is the stuff like I would dream to find in like a bag of clothes. It's stuff I really have to look for. Yeah. And I make it personal in that I try to find a connection to the story. Cecilia's is personal in that she is a part of the story. So, you know, and then in terms of folklore, like I'm real connected to folklore because my father's an actual folklorist. And so like, and my mother too. And so in that way, you know, we've been, ever since I was little, we were really sort of taught to, you know, a universe can be found in a small space. You know, you don't really have to travel far for a big story. You can find the big story, you know, on your block, in your home, in your county. You know, you don't have to go too far. It's really like sort of your resources, you know, your supplies can be small, but if you're resourceful and you're curious and you're, you know, experimental, then you can really sort of a big thing can be found in all of that, you know. So, you know, I feel like really like folklore is honing in and finding like this big universe in something that might otherwise be seen as like limited.
Yeah, and I think Coulter, one of the things that I remember you writing or saying is that if you want to understand the history or like contemporary history from the past 50 years, just look at what gets printed on t-shirts. And yeah. I just love that link between the public vernacular that we see printed on t-shirts, whether they're documenting family reunions or, you know, other kinds of events or sporting, you know, events. And then that vernacular that Cicelia is then mining from the internet. And I just love like that parallel between your two practices and how you're both using that material as conceptual fodder to move forward with on in your work. So that wasn't really a question, but that was, you know, something that we were thinking about as the curators. And it was just really exciting that even though these were two solo exhibitions that we gave, or, you know, that we wanted to give you independently, like these links just kind of naturally emerged between your two practices.
Yeah, about t-shirts, like, you know, if you want to get like a good idea of the human experience for the past 50 years, like go to the Goodwill t-shirt rack. Tells the whole story. Everything we are, we put it on a t-shirt. We like walk around like, this is what I do, this is who I am, this is where I went, you know. And, you know, especially in quilting, there's like the whole like t-shirt quilt. Like somebody's always going to ask you to make freaking t-shirt quilt if you're a quilter. And there was a point at which I was like, you know, I'm just going to embrace this. I'm going to like, quilters don't really like doing that, like doing t-shirt quilts. And I was like, I'm going to love it. Like I'm going to 180 and just turn around and like take these t-shirts and put them all over my quilts everywhere. It's clearly who we are, you know. Wow. I can't deny who we are. And so, I love t-shirts. Use them all the time, you know, sometimes in like ways that make some sort of thematic sense. Sometimes I just use them because I like the color or there's a shape and, you know, who knows. But yeah, I dig a t-shirt.
Yeah, and I don't know if everyone caught this earlier, but all of your materials are donated, right? Like they're left on your doorstep or they're mailed to you. So I was just wondering, like, just a funny question, like some of the most memorable donations that you've gotten or piecing together those stories that might be scandalous or just mysterious?
Yeah, well, lots of times I'll get quilts that have the batting, the middle layer is not like cotton or wool. I've got batting where, I take quilts apart often when they're too ratty to actually keep as they are. I'll use them for something else. And the inside of the quilt, before I got one that was like all like undergarments, like old underwear, like slips and like, from like way back a long time ago, and they were all like knotted up and like they would have been worn out. And then those people had to take that and put it in a quilt. Like that's how cold they were. And a lot of times I'll get stuff that people didn't mean to put in the donation bag. Like, the other day I got like a bunch of photo booth pictures, on the back it says like, sweetheart, I love you, stuff like that. And like, they didn't mean to, that was just in like a pocket of a jacket, so little things. Some things are like, smell weird. And I'm like, I don't know what made that smell that way, but probably mysterious stains, so yeah, there's all sorts of like weird stuff I get sometimes.
Yeah.
I want to ask again a question for both of you, but I'm going to start this time with a specific for Coulter. I want to ask about your writing practices, because Coulter, like Michelle mentioned, your Instagram is really generous with the content that you publish. And I find that I get a lot about each piece from the captions you write, specifically from one, from the piece that's in the Holland show, Mama Upriver from Me. It has this beautiful piece of writing that ends with the sentence, all the mysteries of your mother's life before you that lend freedom to your own decision making because she navigated a raft too. And Cicelia, with your work, you're like, you're embroidering the writing of other people. And I was wondering for either of you, is there like a practice of poetry or journaling or Instagram captioning or any, like, what else do you do? Let's start with Coulter and then go back.
Yeah, well, I write a column in my local newspaper every week. So every Monday I write 500 words first thing in the morning. It's sort of like a humor life column or whatever. It's not like breaking journalism. But I live in a very small town. It's 3,500 people. Everyone knows everyone, so they know who I'm talking about, and So I do get practice actually writing every week, and but one of the reasons I write about my work is, and I write actually in a fairly vague way because some of this stuff is like pretty personal, and there's various reasons I don't necessarily want to have it say it out loud to the internet. So I actually sort of practice writing in like a sort of more universal, vague manner, in a way that I can explain my work still, though, because I do work in abstraction, and when you work in abstraction, but the story is real personal, sometimes you might need to like give a heads up as to sort of generally where you're going with your piece. But yeah, it's probably my newspaper column is the most writing I do.
Is that newspaper column available online, or is that just a print piece?
No, it's still online. I don't know what the subscription is, probably like $5 a month. I mean, a year. But it's the North Mississippi Herald. It's the newspaper for Yallowbusha County, Mississippi.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's the weekly.
Awesome. Cicelia, what about you?
Yeah, I love writing. I've done a lot of writing sort of on and off my whole, I don't know, ever since I was little. I used to draw pictures in my journal like before I could write words. But I actually over the last, I have a 3-year-old, and so I haven't done a whole lot of writing really, but or not as much as I want to, but it's really important to me. And I think the way that it shows up the most is like titling works is really important. And to me, and I think about the title as well as like the material description as a form of writing. I don't know, not quite a poem necessarily, but almost. Yeah, so I think that's, I love titling my work. And just, I mean, I don't know, it just has a lot of potential and opportunity to take a piece like, you know, a whole nother direction.
Do you collect, do you like collect titles? Like if you see a phrase or something while you're looking online and like have this sort of mental collection of phrases or words, or no?
That would be cool. I probably should. That would probably be great. No, I don't though. I mean, the titles, like for I Love You, Are You Okay? That piece, that title came from, so on those two plants, the text messages that I had sent to my dad were limited to phrases of "I love you, are you okay?" Just because I had to, you know, communication needed to be boundaried in order that I stay safe. And so that's kind of where that title came. But I don't know. I mean, I'm always interested in writing, and I'm very interested in the relationship between writing and sculpture, and art, visual art. Yeah, lately the text has not been my own, but I have explored with pieces about using my own writing with them, which is really hard actually. It's a lot easier to use other people's words. I don't know why that is, but yeah. Mm-hmm.
I will do one more question unless we want to open it up. What do you think, Michelle?
Yeah, please, anyone's, if you drop a question in the chat, we will read it, or even kind of call on you. If you'd like to read it, you can let us know, or jump in there. This is a pretty informal, casual conversation at this point. Just excited for everyone to get to meet Cicelia and Coulter. So Michelle, yeah, go for it. And then audience, please jump in.
Okay, so this is kind of more of an observation too that might lead into a question if I can form it, but something else that I see linking both of these works is just obviously, Cicelia, your work is very invested in vulnerability, but Coulter, I feel like I can see that in your work too. And I know that there is really just an empathetic approach for blue collar professions or lower middle class careers or jobs. And I was just wondering if both of you could maybe speak about, I don't know, how either like class or regional identity comes into your work or not.
Yeah, well, for me, I guess, yeah, especially about the professions. I mean, I guess it shows up it's just autobiographical. I can't say it. I've been a waitress.
Graphical, yeah.
Exactly. Until the shutdown, you know, I quit waitressing March 12th of 2020 or whenever they made us stop. And I haven't gone back. But yeah, so from the time I was like, my first job was Chuck E. Cheese when I was 15, and then, you know, in college working at the like Chinese place, and then the catering place, and then at 22 I started waitressing, or 21, 22, started waitressing at Ajax Diner in Oxford, Mississippi, which I can see out that window right there, and stayed there, and then various other places in interims for till 2020. So 20 years. And so yeah, I don't and during all that time I was doing, you know, art stuff. I was painting and then doing textiles. But yeah, I mean, that was my education. Like that was my real education, is my time as a waitress, and all the people I met, and all the people that are still my great friends and still waitressing, and they're doing all their art stuff. They're doing whatever they do. And so yeah, that's where, you know, I learned it all. And
Yeah.
so that there's no way it couldn't be a part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Cicelia, if you want to add anything to that or not, it's all up to you.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I guess I just, I guess just in general, like I think that my only comment is like, you know, occasionally I'll start making something. I'm like, no, this doesn't have anything to do with, this is new. This is a new idea. It's not related to vulnerability. It's not related to my family, whatever. This is new. And then I finish it and I take a step back. I'm like, oh, no, same thing, you know? And it just makes me think one of my professors that I loved from my undergrad, he said, you know, you make what you make. And I really think that's kind of, I think it's true, you know? So that's what I have to add.
I see a question in the chat, and I think, Alana, is that question for Cicelia that asks, do the works of the Holland Project have individual titles? Unless that's about Coulter's, I'm not sure. Oh, Cicelia, okay, yeah. Do the works at Holland have individual titles?
So I thought about it, but then for me, it's really more of an installation in that each piece is, you know, they're all part of a larger whole. So I titled it as a whole. Some of the reviews though do have their own titles as they come with, like for example, Christy's review, Christy the housekeeper, it was Still Here was her title. But yeah, since the piece is about the overall sort of like story of the motel, I didn't entitle each individual towel.
Yeah, I want to follow up with Michelle, what you were asking earlier about work in terms of like employment, but also work. I want to follow up about the idea of work as labor, because a question I often ask about my own studio practice or others is how much value do we put on the labor, the hands-on labor of an artist? And certainly throughout different eras of contemporary art, there's like waves of like very little hands-on labor or a lot of hands-on labor. And I think what I love about both of your work is the kind of extreme amount of hands-on labor. Like Coulter, when you're talking about using sewing by hand, like
very extreme.
I do not do that. Like I do. And Cicelia, you're also working by hand. And I just think that what do you think specifically is the kind of value the audience gets from that labor? Or why does it, is that even a question? Like, yes, it's important to you. It's obvious that it's important to you, but is there anything you want to add about that kind of labor?
Well, for me, and I'm sure Cicelia too, because she does embroidery, unless the audience member knows how to embroider or sew or whatever you did, they will never know how much work you put into it. Like handcraft is like, it is so intense, and like, and you know, I don't even do what the traditional quilters do. That like traditional quilters are like really good. I mean, like their stitches are tiny. They have a million of them on there, and they're all perfect. Like, you know, like what I'm doing is like, it's really nothing compared to what they're doing. And so like the really sort of labor intensive stuff that you know happens in like especially you know quilting or whatever was happening like at a you know sort of a more popular level like 100 years ago. I mean, you know, that stuff, you know, outside of the women who made it is totally like unrecognized as like super labor intensive, you know. But yeah, so you know, I think in craft the labor is always undervalued, you know, even when craft is lifted to like is seen as art by others, you know, it's still a little bit undervalued because nobody really knows a whole lot outside the craft world about the actual process that goes into it. You know, it's not common knowledge to know how to embroider or to know all the steps it takes to make a quilt. Whereas people can kind of envision what it takes to make a painting. They know that you like put the paint in the brush and you know, you put it on the canvas and all that and it looks like the thing. But I don't think, you know, people don't know how to quilt or whatever. I don't think they have a beginning reference point as to the first thing you do, you know. So, and I mean, you know, I understand you're not born knowing how to make a quilt. So.
Yeah, Coulter, I really identify with a lot of things that you're saying in terms of like your approach I think in the beginning of the talk, you're like, you know, I'm just kind of putting it together, or I'm not perfect, whatever. I'm not a perfect maker. That's I'm just not born that way. But especially with the embroidery, like the embroidery of the pieces, like I'm making it up, and I like the way it looks, but it's not like traditional embroidery. If I were to do it in that way, it would take even more time, way more time. But there's something so nice though in general. Like I just love the simple, like just a needle and thread. Mm-hmm. There's something so nice about that, and I think you know there's that meditative quality. Also, just in terms of like practicality, like I'm making work wherever I can snatch a minute, you know, because I've got a 3-year-old that I'm with full time, and so embroidery lends itself to like being, you know, put down and picked back up real quick, you know. So yeah, I don't know. While it is labor intensive, if I was doing it the right way, it would be even harder.
Yeah.
I'm gonna read you this comment from Forrest, who's over in Brooklyn. It's so interesting to me that you created a whole system for color coding the reviews, Cicelia. I'm curious about this kind of sorting process, why you felt it was useful, and I imagine that Coulter must also have to sort through all of those donated textiles. I guess my question is, how or why do you both create systems for sorting? So let's start, Cicelia.
Yeah, I mean, it was a way of, there was like a volume of information that I was taking in, you know, of like all this data, I guess, really, right, of all these reviews. And I think my initial experience of all these is like overwhelm too. But then as I was reading them, you know, there were like these themes that were emerging, and so I really wanted to be able to make it easier for the viewer to access those themes of like, oh, here's another review that's, you know, they had bed bugs too, or like, I don't know, whatever. I think it's about that, like organizing information so that way it's not so overwhelming, really.
Yeah, my materials, and I have a whole building. Like it's like you could do an episode of Hoarders. Like it's so much. It's all organized by story. Like I don't have it organized by color, or like I do have like whites. Like whites are over here because mainly I use white for backing, and so I need big pieces of it. And then I have a area of pink because a lot of times I use pinks as like a highlight, and so I need to grab like a fluorescent pink or whatever. Everything else is pretty much sorted how the donation came in, or like I remember the story that's connected to whatever the fabric is. It's like, yeah, I know it's really sorted by, oh, that piece came from Abbeville, Mississippi, that lady who makes those cakes. You know, it's exactly what Sue was just talking about. Like, you know, those two rooms had bed bugs or whatever, you know, like I connect the fabric that same way. Like, you know, this over here and this over here, even though they're separate in the studio, I know who they came from, and, you know, the other fabrics that they came with as well, even though it all gets, you know, in there like a tornado all mixed up. But.
Okay, so I have another question from Otis to Coulter, and Otis asks, I would like to know more about how Coulter receives her donations. Is it a donation box with random donations from random people? Have you ever formed any relationships with the donators? And then also, how many pieces you might be working on at a time, and how much time you would say each piece takes?
Yeah, donation box is an excellent idea. I should do that. But I don't have a donation box. They just leave it at the front door. You know, I live like 2 blocks away from my studio. So usually one of my kids rides by on a bike and is like, Mama got a donation, or somebody will text me and is like, this donation's been out there for 2 days. Do you want me to pull it in my truck? You know. So yeah, there's no system. And really there was, I don't call out for donations like you know, it's just word of mouth. People, you know, part of my, like, I like to receive these donations because they come from me. They come to me. I don't want to like push it. I want it to naturally occur, you know, and I want to sort of let go of that aspect of my materials and let it be in the hands of fate, luck, whatever, the other people, and have their need to get rid of the work, to get rid of the material, but not throw it away because they feel guilty about throwing it away, or they don't want to throw it away, but they don't have room for it. Whatever that is, that's how it gets to me. And so I want that to be a part of the materials I'm using. Last week, like, I got on eBay and bought some things. And first of all, it was super stressful. I'd never done it before. I will never do it again. And it didn't feel the same. You know, it doesn't feel the same to get on eBay and like outbid some poor lady who probably wanted it too. And, or even worse, get outbid. And you're like, you know what? That quilt could have been in a museum, but no, you outbid me. And so way too stressful. I would much rather the work just come to me and have the people, you know, that whole inclination to give and donate to me is part of it. So yeah.
And then I have a question. So quilting is such a slow process, and that leaves a lot of time to, and embroidery is too, to change your mind about formal concepts. And so I'm just wondering how you retain that sense of immediacy and gesture that your works have, even though that process is so laborious and could lead for a lot of indecision, I guess, when you're working. And that question, I guess, is for Coulter.
Well, you know, I spend like 4 days composing the piece. So that actually is, and then once I start actually sitting down and sewing it, I've already decided what I'm doing. So there's no decisions after that. So yeah, and I really think it out. I know it, you know, people use the term improv or whatever. It's really not, it's not planned ahead of time. I don't even own a sketchbook, but I move the fabric around. I can sort of envision ahead in my mind what it's going to look like in the end, and it's just a matter of, you know, getting there. But yeah, I mean, I guess the spontaneity is like probably just me messing up, and then the you know, the formalized part is me trying to do it right. You know, so somehow I have this thing that like sort of meets in the middle, I think.
Yeah.
We've got some more questions. One was from Tony to Coulter. There's a sense of humor that's reflective of the work and artist. Also, can you comment about your new kinetic quilts, which are quite funny too? And I'm as you comment on that, Coulter, I also want to add that Alana put in a link to the Instagram so you can see the moving quilt. And I think we're talking about the one titled Jubilee. And so, yeah, please comment on the kinetic quilts. And then also, one of my questions I'm going to attach to that is, can you talk about the word Jubilee?
Yeah, so the kinetic quilt idea came from me like getting more sculptural with these things and really wanting to move them around. I mean, quilts always move anyway. You know, they turn when you turn on the bed, you fold them, they blow in the wind on the line or whatever. So they're not static anyhow. I was doing a show here at the gallery last fall about gambling. I'm really from this place called Phoenix City, or my family's from this place called Phoenix City, Alabama, which has like this notorious gambling history. all these old gambling joints. So I wanted to incorporate like slot machines, moving games of chance, like fair, sort of double Ferris wheel, you know, like midway stuff. And so I decided to make, you know, something sort of turn in like a Wheel of Fortune type thing. And the first one I made, y'all, was so bad. It was like made out of house insulation and like a knitting needle to like, anyway. Now I've sort of fine-tuned it a little bit more where I'm using like actual wood and metal as a base. And it took an embarrassing amount of time to figure that out. But yeah, so I really like to, you know, move the stuff around. And that sort of bled over into the Jubilee piece at Holland. That one is about this old riverboat that used to be on the river I grew up on. I played on the banks all the time when I was little, and it was one of those old like steam riverboats with a big paddle wheel on the back, you know. And so I had this piece that I made the piece for Holland where that, you know, it spins and it's supposed to sort of, in my mind, emulate the water that the paddle wheel would churn up behind the boat. And the boat was called Jubilee. And my little brother sings a song called Jubilee that is about the cycle of life, you know, or like sort of like how we go through phases. And the chorus is swing and turn, live and learn, Jubilee, you know, about how we go through these like phases, circular phases in life or whatever. So that was all this sort of like one, like several ideas all in one big piece. So. Oh, and if you want to make something spin, don't spend like 6 months trying to make all these gadgets. You just like go to Home Depot and get a Lazy Susan piece of hardware. Like, and then you've solved the problem in 5 seconds instead of months. And yeah, so just word of advice there. Oh, and you know, also part of the kinetic work is really about hand work. I wanted to hand build, use traditional hand techniques to build machines. So it was sort of and women's like handwork and then machine taking that over. What if we took a needle and thread and made a machine out of using needle and thread techniques, you
know? Michelle, do you want to read Eliza's question to Cicelia? Thanks, Coulter.
Yeah, thank you. So Eliza asks, Cicelia, I really enjoy how much the material relates to the concept. Can you talk about how you decide to integrate materials such as the towel or artificial plants? How those ideas came to you?
Yeah, I mean, the materials have meaning, right? Like, I think that's where, you know, before when I was thinking about like how I care so much about the materials list of the thing, right? So using linens and towels just like made sense given the fact that these reviews are so many of them especially complain about like linens being dirty or not being able to get towels or dirty towels or whatever. And as far as so the materials are meaning and metaphor, I guess. And so as far as the artificial plants, for that piece, they were, you know, essentially stand-ins for my dad and I, but also I was thinking about how waiting, so the plants were set in a waiting room, and then like a waiting room as a space, obviously waiting, a place where things are kind of stuck, right? Or there's like a stasis there. Similarly, artificial plants can't grow, right? And they're sort of like stuck, which was also the case with our relationship because of the relationship between my dad and I, right? Because of illness and so on. It was stuck and sort of could not grow. With that, also, it's I thought a lot about it too as a place of like holding on to love, right? Also, so it's my I guess intention was not to be completely negative or whatever, but more like a place of waiting, like holding, waiting. It's not here or there, it's in between. Yeah. Yeah, I'm always thinking about the sort of potential metaphors in material. The sandpaper quilt piece that Michelle mentioned in the beginning, I was thinking about, so I made a big sandpaper. I actually, because I know I hear, hang on. I like to bring like a degree of actuality to these virtual things. Like here, like, wow. So this, yeah, you know what I mean? It's just like nice that it's here and I'm not showing you a digital image. But I made a quilt and then organized a quilting bee. And the idea was that we were going to be like going through this abrasive experience as a group, you know, but thinking about how that can build community. Yeah, but then also again, so the material, it's like has metaphor and meaning.
And I think so that was just one block of a larger quilt that you just showed. So it was like many of those.
Yeah.
And I think what I'm seeing as a connection between all of these things is this really physical sense of touch. So like the towels and the linens, like the sand is really different from the sandpaper, but also a fake plant is like something you can touch without damaging it. It's like there's a kind of there's a different kind of reciprocity happening with each of your materials and the audience, because you, in the show at Holland Project, you ask people in the exhibition statement to please take a towel and take it to the bench and sit down with it and read it and just see that one thing really well. And I think it's also to like feel that one thing really well. And with the sandpaper quilt, that was like, so it's such a simple like metaphor, but it kind of goes to what Coulter was saying, like the labor that you're putting into something like quilting won't be understood by anyone unless they've also made a quilt or sewn by hand, because then they'll understand how painful that can be on your hands. And so the sandpaper quilt kind of gave us an insight into that kind of labor and the sort of physical stamina that it takes to do it. And so I think that, yeah, that was a great question about materials, and made me think about your work differently too, about the way we touch the materials, because there is a performative interactive element to it. And like with the spinning Jubilee piece,
Yeah.
I really love that aspect of both of your work, that we get to play along a little bit. Like it is a little bit like going to not a museum where you can't traditionally touch anything or you're not supposed to.
Like, I think it would be a shame to take away the tactile nature of textiles. You know, I mean, that what else are they for? You know,
Right.
So, you know, touch them.
Totally.
You know?
Totally. Yeah. So
I'm
one
gonna,
of my, oh.
Nope, go ahead.
Oh, one of the projects that I've been working on currently, it's another interactive piece where they're like these little, just because they're like these little small felt phones. But the point is like, there's, actually this relates to the, anyway, the point is they're like little finger puppets. Mm-hmm. But I guess my point is that, yeah, that there's like, it's like, yeah, it's a shame. It's so enjoyable to work with textiles, and it's like, why would I not want to share that with the audience? Yeah.
Yes. I'm gonna read this other comment from Brett Van Hosen, especially because now we're connecting all four of us, which is awesome. Dr. Brett Van Hosen was Michelle and my art history professor at UNR, and is a very special person in our lives and the lives of so many people. She says, "Thank you so much for this discussion and for the introduction to Coulter and Cicelia's amazing work. Your work really strikes a chord with me. I've been slowly working on a crazy quilt that combines shirts my dad never wore, the hopeful side of his unsuccessful battle with cancer, and my son's worn out blue jeans over the past decade. You give me reason to keep creating this project. Love you, Michelle's. P.S. thanks for the point about reciprocal vulnerability. I think that reciprocity is really key. Hence why I'm reading this out loud, Brett. So I hope I didn't put you on the spot, but that was a really beautiful message. Does anyone else in the audience, I'm going to look through here, want to ask a question like live on air? If so, we're going to like have a quiet moment and just unmute and jump in. Okay, that's okay. That's also fine. I just thought I sometimes it takes a break for someone's jumping. Just no pressure. I also put into the chat earlier a link to Coulter. You mentioned your brother's song Jubilee, which I love. I was listening to this morning while looking at your work and that piece, hoping that connection would come up. So I put a link to a set he played here in Seattle for the radio program KEXP, which is really awesome. It kind of felt like a soundtrack to your work for me. So I'm glad that I wasn't totally off base with that one. And I wanted to ask Cicelia if there was any connection. We have talked about a connection to music, and you don't have to bring like, if that's like not existent in this work, fine, but is there any connection to music or any other form that you like read or listen to or something else that inspires you during the making of this work?
That's a good question. You know, I mean, when I'm making, I'm listening to music all the time, you know, or something. But I don't really see music like showing up in these pieces really. So
that's great. I sometimes like when questions are just like yes and no answers, because it actually brings more clarity for me as a viewer.
Yeah, it's nice though. It's nice because it's not something I really thought about before. It's a good question.
Okay, we're getting more now. Michelle, go ahead.
So Britt is asking, I'm wondering how, if at all, these works have changed for you or the viewers after the heaviness and grief of 2020, especially in relation to themes of motherhood or family, shelter, survival, safety, health, patience, escape, loss, etc. And I think that's for both of you.
Well, I'll say that 2020 didn't provide all that for me as much as 2015 through 2018 did. So, you know, 2020 wasn't my worst year. It was a few years in a row before that. And so all those things of motherhood, family, shelter, survival, safety, health, patience, escape, loss, all of that is my work. And the only thing that I did, 2020, I'd lost my job. But all that other stuff was sort of up in the air the years before that. You know what I mean? So all those things are in my work. It just doesn't apply to 2020 for me. I know it does for a whole lot of other people. You know, we all experienced 2020 in the same way on a like base level, but then all the details were different for each one of us, you know. So 2020 wasn't the worst year for me. But all those things are in my work just from another year. So.
Yeah, it takes a second before it like filters in, you know. Yeah, I don't I mean, I have a big I don't know how or if the loss of my father changes the work. It's a question I have. I don't have an answer to it. Does it? I don't know. I mean, it's funny. It's a question I keep asking like some of my other artist friends. I'm like, what does this mean? You know, they're like, oh, I don't know. So that's something that I don't know. I've got a long time to sort of meditate on. but yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's kind of the biggest 2020 event to what's the word I want? I don't know. I don't, I guess what I'm trying to say is that I haven't thought a whole lot about like what does a pandemic mean in relationship to someone living in a motel. I mean, you know, I just haven't thought about that yet.
Cicelia, what does purple represent in the linens, in the categories?
Danger.
Oh, danger of some kind. Okay. And I think you already both answered this other question about 2020 being a tough year. And then Cicelia, a question from Tony, was there feedback about your work from your dad and or family?
Good question. So yeah, I mean, yeah, it's interesting when, what happens when you make work about a family member, because there are other people related to my dad, right? There are other people who know him. And one of the biggest things I've learned from my dad is that, you know, we all have an individual relationship with that person, and they're very different, and they're all true. And in general, while my dad did not know about this piece when I was making it, he still submitted a review, and randomly, like he doesn't leave reviews online, you know, I don't know. But later, this piece he had a harder time with because he felt shame about being there. I made a different work about shame, and the thing about shame is that, you know, by talking about bringing it to the light, the piece was about kind of bringing our shame to the light, and that's what makes shame dissolve. While I don't know, you know, if I helped my dad in any way, I do know that, you know, as I said before, that the week he had been there 3 years. The week that this work the show opened, my dad wasn't there any, you know, he was housed. So I don't know what that is, but it's cool. As far as my other family though, they find a lot of meaning, I think, and healing from these works. And I don't know if that answers.
Thank you. Yeah, and just to let the viewers know, the work Cicelia made about shame and bringing it to light was on T-shirts. So, which I was thinking of earlier when Coulter was talking about, and everything we are is on T-shirts.
I didn't think about that.
Not only like commemorated on T-shirts, like in a commercial sense, but Cecilia's work printed. Correct me if I'm wrong, but people anonymously submitted their feelings of shame to written like one sentence kind of, and then you printed them on T-shirts that were sized according to the time they first felt that shame, like what size T-shirt they would have worn, and then the printing material. I'll let you say this part.
Oh, sure. I printed the text in a natural dye that was very light fast, so that the shame fades over time, right? But the dye or pigment I derived from St. John's wort, which is, you know, a medicinal herb for depression and anxiety and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really, really amazing. Like how much has been put on T-shirts, literally across the board. We have 2 minutes left in this talk. And I think there's a couple thank yous in the chat. And so artists will take a record of the chat so you can read everything afterwards too. But I wanted to say, I know Michelle and I have like a few thank yous to say at the end here. So thank you, Cicelia and Coulter and Alberto and Alana for installing and making this happen and involving us with the Holland Project. I personally have derived so much of my artistic life from the support I got at Holland as a younger artist. And so to get to come do this has been, one, just amazing to be with the artists, and two, my best friend from college and life and art doppelganger, Michelle Laxalt, and I got to work together and talk once a month over the course of the last year. And even though things were postponed a bunch, we just got more time to talk about all of this. So it's really great.
Yeah, ditto to everything Michelle just said. Thank you all so much for being here, and Alberto for really going above and beyond making all of this happen. And I was just so happy we could share Coulter and Cecilia's work with our Reno family, because yeah, being totally all over the country and having relocated from what is a very special hometown, it just meant a lot to share work with you guys from some of the regions that we went to. So that felt really special too.
Yeah, and thank you all. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Yay. So if everyone, before we go, if everyone could unmute and do a round of applause for Coulter and Cicelia. And Alberto, if you don't mind just leaving this Zoom open for a couple minutes so I can copy all the chat.
Yeah, of course. I just also want to jump in and thank both Cicelia, Coulter, Michelle Lassaline, Michelle Laxalt for all your time and energy. I know it was a very emotional conversation, and a lot of the audiences also shared some emotional content. So thank you for everyone who had a lot to say. And for those who didn't have a lot to say, I know they're sitting with what was said today. I dropped in the link some more information about the Holland Project, how you can donate, how you can become a member to keep exhibitions like this and talks like this going. So I want to thank everyone for showing up. If you're located in Reno or the surrounding area, I know we had someone from Grass Valley, which is about a 2-hour drive, come visit the show. So if you're close by, the gallery is open Tuesday through Friday from 12 to 6 p.m. If not, by appointment. So thank you all so much for tuning in again, and I hope to see you in the gallery if you haven't checked out the shows.